right, this is exciting, isn't it?
Here we go, guys, in 5, 4, 3.
Here we go.
It's time for Joan Esposito. Live, local, and progressive.
Thank you for good programming. I appreciate the content and really enjoyed every moment.
It's a privilege to have you on your station and listen. It's good stuff. It's very educational.
It's time for Joan Esposito on WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk.
Hey, thanks for being here. Friday, June 19th, also known as Juneteenth, a federal holiday. So maybe you are listening to us as you are driving to a picnic or a family celebration, or in other ways, maybe you're heading to a museum in some way honoring this day. What is Juneteenth? June 19th, 1865. That's 2 years, actually slightly more than 2 years, after the Emancipation Proclamation. Remember? Come on, go back to your schooling. Emancipation Proclamation was the proclamation that announced to the world that slavery was no more. Except that, we didn't have CNN back then. So it took a little over 2 years for that news to make it to Texas. Texas learned about the Emancipation Proclamation when Union troops showed up in Galveston to enforce it. So, implying that maybe some people had heard about it, but we're trying to keep it quiet. I don't know. Let's not be so cynical, Joan. So more than 2 years after slavery was officially ended, it was actually ended in Galveston, Texas on June 19th, 1865, which has come to be known as Juneteenth, the actual day that slavery ended. One of the social media accounts that I follow, which you should follow too, it's called Alt National Park Service. Trust me, they're real rabble rousers. They say about Juneteenth, it's a reminder that rights and justice are not always delivered equally or immediately. Gosh, that sounds pretty timely, doesn't it? Well, I hope you got the day off from work. I am here. Paul Shavari is toiling away back in the studio. He is here. We are Juneteenthing together. Hey, Paul, I wanted to ask you something. The Blackhawk that retired, Jonathan, the guy who was the head of the team.
Yeah.
How do you say his last name? It's like Teows.
But it's pronounced Taves.
With like a V sound? Taves?
Yep. Yeah, like rhymes with saves. Yeah, Taves.
Well, good. I'm glad I asked you, and I'm glad I didn't try to say it without having asked you first.
Yeah, we would have known if you said like Jonathan Toes. Yeah.
Toes. Toes. So yeah, he's retiring. It's wonderful to be a professional athlete and to have that kind of skill. But the shelf life is so short. Do you think Jonathan, is it Taves?
Correct.
Do you think he'll end up in the broadcast booth or what?
I don't know, because I don't remember him being that talkative when he was the captain, kind of just like very short answers, but you never know with some of these guys. But he was a likable player. He was definitely a decent team captain, and I think people were proud to have him be the one to be the first to raise the cup every time they won it.
And under him, they had 3 Stanley Cups, didn't they?
That's correct.
Is that
right? Yeah. 2010, 2013, and 2015.
Wow. Well, keep an eye on Jonathan. I don't even know, does he live here anymore? Because sometimes they move away.
Yeah, I think he's Canadian, which he had to go away for a while. There was some sort of injury or something, and then he kind of worked his way back into the league, and then played with the Winnipeg Jets, and that's where he announced his retirement today, was from Winnipeg. I think he's from that part of Canada. I know he's Canadian. I'm not sure which part though.
Well, we congratulate him on his retirement, and hopefully he will find something to keep himself busy, other than, sitting back and counting his awards and his money. Something other than that.
Yeah, and he'll never have to pay for a drink in Chicago. I'm sure of that.
Never, ever, ever again. Thank you, Paul. Thanks for. I knew you would know those things.
Sure thing. Any sports questions today? Yeah.
Taves. That just doesn't make any sense at all. I'm sorry.
Canadians for you.
Yeah, really. All that decency has gone to their head. Oh, speaking of decency, lack thereof, I don't know. The Iran agreement that the memorandum of understanding that Donald Trump signed in Versailles yesterday started to come apart almost instantly. Remember, Iran considers Lebanon part of that deal. Israel has said, "Yeah, you can sign any deal you want. It doesn't apply to us." And that's a problem, because Israel has decided back then, that it didn't want to stop the missile attacks in Lebanon. They didn't want to stop advancing into the country. I don't know what kind of conversation took place between Donald Trump and Bibi Netanyahu, but the latest is that both Lebanon and Israel have agreed to a ceasefire. Now, a permanent ceasefire? Oh, no. A ceasefire for now, like for now. Is it going to be a ceasefire till Iran signs the deal and the ink is all dry and we're ready to start negotiating? Who knows? Donald Trump has turned over this whole negotiation to J.D. Vance. Oh, poor boy. If only I liked him, I would feel sorry for him. All the reports are that Air Force Two, the vice president's plane, was all gassed up and ready to go. J.D. Vance was ready to fly over to Europe to sit down and talk with the Iranians and get these negotiations off the ground. And then when Iran said, no, I'm sorry, Israel is still bombing Lebanon, so we're not going to show up. So J.D. Vance did not get on the plane. Now that Israel and Lebanon have agreed to this temporary ceasefire, they're not promising how long it's going to be. There is hope that everything will get back on track. There's hope. Hope springs eternal. But Donald Trump is apparently getting a little ticked off at all of the people who are saying this wasn't a good deal. What do you mean it wasn't a good deal? It wasn't a good deal? Don't you tell me it wasn't a good deal. As those kinds of stories are becoming more and more prominent, Donald Trump is apparently getting angrier and angrier. Timothy Snyder talked about this. Even in the New York Times, how Israel first said, hey, you didn't tell us you were doing this. You didn't ask us to participate. We haven't been a part of this. We didn't read the words. We're not going to agree to it. Well, Donald Trump has bought himself at least a temporary ceasefire. The New York Times is reporting Israel, stunned by Trump's Iran deal, sees it as a catastrophic capitulation. Yeah, it is reports like that are making Donald Trump grumpy, angry. Why does no one recognize the incredible job he's done? Timothy Snyder is, of course, the professor who has spent his whole career researching and writing about authoritarianism. His book on tyranny. If you don't read any other political book, read that one. I mean, it's very small. It is The language is very simple. It's very clear. You can literally read it in about an hour. But it is small, but it is mighty. Timothy Snyder posted on social media recently what he thinks of the Iran deal. I know you're going to be shocked by this. He doesn't think much of it. Listen to this.
Good morning and happy Capitulation Day. Today, the United States capitulates. We have lost a war, and now we are forced to pay the victor, the Iranian regime, hundreds of billions of dollars. We are forced to sit by and watch as the Iranian regime establishes a new mechanism of strategic and economic control, which is closing the Straits of Hormuz. We are now forced to essentially walk away from the Iranian nuclear weapons program, over which previously we had some leverage, but over which now we have none. This level of defeat is only possible at the hands of a super loser like Mr. Trump, a term I've defined elsewhere. A war of this foolishness is possible only as an element of superpower suicide, something else I've written about elsewhere. But it's important to notice this is a war that not only didn't have to happen, it's a war that shouldn't have happened. The main cause of this war, as we all know, was that the president thought that it would be fun. There's no consolation to be taken from a catastrophe of this sort, but there is a lesson. And the lesson is you cannot let this much power be concentrated in the hands of one individual. We have to return to a country which is closer to the ideals of justice and equality, not just for our own sakes, but to prevent our leaders from doing idiotic things like this.
To prevent our leaders from doing idiotic things like this. One of the many voices that thinks that this has been a disastrous undertaking. It has cost incredible amounts of money, 13 lives, 400 some serious injuries. And why? Because Bibi Netanyahu convinced Donald Trump that he could get in and out of this mess quickly, drop some bombs, be a hero. Buddy, you want that Nobel Peace Prize? I am telling you, this is how you get it. And it didn't go that way because Donald Trump didn't believe his own advisors. That's another thing that apparently is making him mad. People saying that the military and the State Department all pointed out to him that if he went ahead and bombed Iran, that they would respond by closing the Strait of Hormuz. And by all accounts, he said, I don't believe that. I don't believe that'll happen. He thought because he blew up some tiny little boats, some speedboats, because he captured Maduro and his wife, probably had some help with that. He thought that he was the big dog. And all he had to do was drop some bombs, and Iran would be begging him for a settlement. Begging him for a settlement. Even though all the people who had expertise, they probably still have expertise, but Donald Trump knew better. Donald Trump knew better. He knew what would happen. He knew they would crumble. And then all those protesters who had taken to the streets, why, they would overthrow what was left of the government, put themselves in power, and he would be viewed so positively, not only by the people of Iran, but by history. Didn't work out that way, and once he was in it, he didn't know what to do. He didn't know what to do. His typical techniques of threat and bluster didn't really get him very far with Iran. Are you shocked by that? Don't be shocked by that. He really is completely out of his depth. He is a promoter. He is an entertainer. He is a showman. He is not a politician. He doesn't care about educating himself on any of these issues. Remember in his first term when they did the briefing every day and it was reported that they had stopped giving him paperwork and they had started drawing posters, drawing graphs, presenting him his daily briefing in a much more condensed, completely visual way, because they discovered that when they gave him a few pages to read every morning, he did not. He didn't read it. So they drew pictures for him. They drew pictures for him. How anybody who was alive and paying attention in his first term, where he lied more than 30,000 times. I've seen so many interviews with Trump voters who are now having buyer's remorse. And they're all like, well, you know, he said there weren't going to be any more wars. He said he was going to bring down grocery prices. He said that he was going to bring down gas prices. And oh my God, he hasn't done it. Were you asleep during his first term, where he tailored whatever message he thought would be most effective to the audience he was speaking to? You think there should be free in vitro fertilization? He's your man. It's going to be free if you elect him. You think in vitro fertilization is somehow against the Bible? He's going to tell you that you can count on him and that he will restrict all of it. Did anybody else notice that? I don't know. Call me crazy. I don't know. Seemed like it was kind of really out there. He didn't really hide it. It was out there for anybody to see. But I guess, you know, there are a lot of people who don't want to participate in politics. There are a lot of people who've thought that the Democrats somehow are looking down their nose at them, like the Democrats are, you know, all the Ivy Leaguers and all the educated people, and that they look down their nose at us, so we're going to show them. We're going to show them. We're not going to vote. We're going to vote for anybody but a Democrat. I've heard people say that. Why did you vote for Trump? Well, I couldn't vote for a Democrat. Really? No, I couldn't. It's like somehow that would be a sin of monstrous proportions, a repudiation of everything they believe and everything they think about themselves. Voting for a Democrat, those people who look down their nose at us, well, we're going to show them, even if we just vote for chaos. I don't know. You know, Democrats, I think, have seen what works. What works is not a white paper or a brand new policy position. What works to bring voters in are the things that matter to them. You're going to bring down the cost of health care? You're going to make it more affordable? That's something that people know. You're going to do whatever it takes to bring down the price of gas? That's something people understand. You're going to do whatever it takes to try to promote unions and create more union jobs? No, there's a big segment of the population. It's not rocket science, people. So. Today is the day the Obama Center is officially open to the public. I have not tried to get tickets, but I've seen people post on social media that the number of tickets is sold out for at least a month or more. So if you do want to go to the Obama Center before summer is over, you might want to get your name on the list right now. We shared with you some of what Barack said and what Michelle said at the opening, which, by the way, was a who's who of the entertainment and political world, as opposed to, you know, like a UFC fighter. I'm sorry. I want to get back to the positive. The Obama Center kicked off its existence with a great party, wonderful speeches, great music, and not only all stars on stage, but an all-star audience, for God's sake. The kind of audience Donald Trump would give his right arm to have. Oh, he'll say he doesn't believe so, but he does. Anyway, I was listening to more of Michelle Obama's speech, and you should listen to the whole thing. It's really amazing. I played a little bit for you yesterday, but I grabbed some more of it that I want to share with you. Listen to this.
Barack, you gotta look at me. You told me all those years ago that you couldn't promise me the world, but you could promise me an interesting life. And of course, you outdid yourself and managed to give me both. I know it hasn't always been easy, but there hasn't been a single second through this experience that standing by your side hasn't left me in awe. 8 years in the crucible, and not once did you melt from the heat. Not once did you let it harden you. Instead, you used it to reveal your truest essence, your stubborn optimism and unflinching courage, your dazzling brilliance and unpretentious decency, your ferocious work ethic, and absolutely unshakable moral fiber. And to do it all as a first, and the higher standard that comes with all that, the claims that a U.S. senator and constitutional law expert wasn't qualified for the job, the lies about your birthright, your faith, your patriotism, the outrage when you stated the biological fact that if you'd had a son, that he too would be black. Yet, you were unflappable at every turn, always focused, always calm, always looking at the long view. How absurd it is to even imagine that you might have buckled under the pressure even once, lashed out in frustration, lost your temper. How absurd it is to imagine that you might have done anything but make our family and this entire country proud.
Don't you miss those days? I sure do. Now we have a president who is an oaf, who is ridiculous, who is not taken seriously. Oh, and did you hear what he did at the G7? He shoots himself in the foot all the time. You know, in Europe, Giorgia Meloni, the far-right leader of Italy, she was about the only one in Europe that even halfway liked Donald Trump. She tried to be kind of a liaison, a peacemaker. At the G7, he was interviewed by Italian television. Oh, what a moron he is. And he told Italian television that Giorgia Meloni was probably happy I talked to her. I didn't have to talk to her. She begged me to take a picture with her. She wanted a picture with me so badly, I wouldn't have taken it, but I felt sorry for her. Giorgia Meloni said he is inventing that out of whole cloth. Even people in Italy, even politicians in Italy who don't like Giorgia Meloni are coming to her defense. He has taken the one country that was a sort of a sometimes ally and severed those relations, as he does so well. What a noodle. We're going to take a break. The phone lines are open. The text lines are open, 773-763-9278. I'll say it slower when we come back after this break.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
773-763-WCPT. That is how you can text me. That is how you can call me. Real quick, Greg from Lake in the Hills texted me a link to a USA Today article. We had mentioned this briefly. I didn't make a big deal out of it, so you may not remember. One of the stupid things that the Trump administration said they were going to do was, we have a bunch of buoys, scientific buoys that have all this instrumentation out in the ocean. I think there were like 5 of them. And they recorded temperatures and wind, tides and currents, a lot of information that was vital for fisher people. Fisher people gonna go out, want to know where to go, how the currents are, and for no apparent reason that anybody can figure out, the Trump administration said, we're just gonna get rid of those. Why? Well, there was a huge backlash. Senator Lisa Murkowski from Alaska, Republican, they use that information a lot up there for fishing. She and Democratic Senator Jeff Merkley from Oregon put together a 2-page bill that said no federal funds should be used to decommission the system until after a thorough review and assessment. It was unanimously signed. So the Trump administration has backed off. They had taken one out, but they said, we'll leave the other 4 in place. They're not going to put back the one they took out, but we'll leave the rest of them alone. Good grief. The morons are in charge. God help us. God help us with this war on science. Let's go to the phone lines. Our good friend Bob is on the line from Indiana. Hello, Bobby.
Oh, afternoon, Joan.
Afternoon. Happy weekend. Happy Juneteenth.
I tell you, this old honky boy has been laughing his arse off, and I'll tell you why. The contrast in every way since the dedication and now the opening today of the Obama Center.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this time of year in our area, could you imagine nicer weather opening up than what we've had for yesterday and today?
No, it's been beautiful.
Like that.
Yeah.
And compared to the mess that they were having or could have had, even worse, in D.C. for the mess they were having.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, all the way around, I think it's just wonderful, just desserts. And
you mean the fact that it literally rained on Trump and his big time celebration?
Well, I don't want to say anything, but I will. Yes, but the only political campaign I ever had a extremely minor part in was in Michigan City. I was helping put together mailers back in 2000, and I was already sick, and I couldn't do anything for his second one except make sure that everybody in the household was able to vote. But that was the one time I did something, and even for Obama's third term, which was my personal idea, because, we have never had a perfect president. We never will.
No.
That's ridiculous. But he was damn good enough. And he would have been a hell of a lot better if he would have had a half-ass reasonable Congress to work with for most of his time.
Yeah, and considering that he didn't, I mean, what he accomplished was even more impressive.
I know, but I mean, that's why I wanted him to have a third term with a Democratic House and Senate to see what he could really do. I was really ticked off, but I'll die that way on that one. But I mean, there's a lot of, shall we say, just desserts and just something good for the whole country in the way that went off yesterday and all the people and what they said compared to the crapola we've been getting from the other end.
Yeah. Yes. You
have a good one, Joan.
You have a better one, Bobby.
I'll try.
Okay.
Bye.
All righty. Bye-bye. Let's go to our good friend Jim on the line from Chicago. Hello, Jim.
Hi, Joan. St. Patrick was the first Homo sapien to put down in writing that slavery was an evil. Of course, that came from the horse's mouth because he was a slave. But I just missed it because it's June 18th. But Hexef is lecturing Europe on a couple of things. First of all, their immigration policy. I'm sure they didn't want to adopt this nightmare to revolve the United States. They want to spend billions and billions of dollars incarcerating people. And then he goes on to say that we should have helped them in the Strait of Hormuz. We should have been there with, Europe should have been there to, because apparently we helped Europe in World War II, so therefore they're forever indebted to us. And you know what's strange is Europe, the George Marshall Plan after World War II, everybody was unionized. Like the Italians, they come out, the union workers come out in Palestine all the time. They huge numbers for the Palestinians there. But they're the European countries, they come out the most for the Palestinian cause. But when you think about Hexef, how they must think they just can't wait for him to leave. I mean, I'm serious, Joe. How'd you like to be excited by this nut? And Trump is just a fool. And then Vance goes the opposite direction yesterday, saying that we'll cut off your. He basically told Israel, we're going to cut you off. You get 2/3 of our taxpayers are sick and tired of picking up the tab for your bombs and guns and so on and so forth. So that's what he said yesterday. So they're really the whole thing is a disarray, Joan. I mean, this war really exacerbated because it just shows you how incompetent this administration is. That's the sad part about it. And then you put a face. Yeah, go ahead, Joan. I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say, I don't know how you could say this administration is incompetent. I mean, look at the amazing things they've done. We now have not quite a peace deal with Iran, but almost a peace deal with Iran, and all we had to do was give them everything. Come on.
Right.
Jeez. What do you expect?
And Paul Prussia was right. He was absolutely right. We could have saved a lot of lives by just saying we'll give you $2 trillion for your uranium.
Mm-hmm.
And
we'll keep the same deal. You just have to promise to take Obama's name off of it.
Right, exactly. I mean, they must have kicked that around. I can't believe how incompetent these people are. But they show it day after day after day. And then when the news media tries to portray this guy like he's sane, like he's a sane actor, it's just, it's hysterical. When you can see the guy is nuts as a fruitcake. You know what I mean, Joan?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's amazing to watch. But we've got 5 months to go, 4 months to go. Somebody can't wait. You're counting down. I'm counting down every day.
Yeah, I want to start just counting it down by the day, but I'm kind of trying to wait till it's fewer days.
No, I know. Same here. Because November 3rd is like, okay, this is June. Yeah. I can't wait for June to be over. I never wanted to push the calendar so hard in my life. And I hit the end of my life. Yeah. And I pushed it like it was a bowling ball. Anyway, Joan, have a great weekend, and thanks for taking my call, Jim.
You too. Have a wonderful weekend, Jim. We are going to take a break. We're going to get back to your texts and calls right after this.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
It is Friday, and Monday through Thursday, we read your texts, take your calls for the first hour of the show. But on Friday, we do it for the first half of the show. So until 3:30 today, we are going to be sharing your thoughts about the news of the week, the news of the day. Let's go back to the phone lines. You know, Bobby from Indiana was just talking about Paul from Seattle. So let's go to Paul from Seattle. Hey, Paul.
Okay. Well, hi, Joan. And hi, Bobby. So have you seen this, the latest on the reflecting pool?
What's the latest?
The paint. Well,
yes.
you knew about all the algae, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the thinking or experts were saying because it was painted this dark blue color, it's absorbing too much ultraviolet light and it's not reflecting it back to kill the algae.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think the old pool had any problems, but so they started pouring in hydrogen peroxide to kill the algae. Like, well, yeah, truckloads. I mean, they actually use pouring in gallon jugs of it like you would in your backyard pool is laughable. But so now though, the paint is bubbling and peeling off the surface, and the speculation was that all this hydrogen peroxide is causing the paint to peel. But I don't think that's it, because hydrogen peroxide is that's what they're using in pools now, rather than chlorine.
I saw somebody posted on social media. I didn't have a time to read it thoroughly, but there was this piece of what looked like almost a piece of plastic kind of floating and on the pool. And they said it was a big piece of the paint that had peeled off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, but here's the problem is that not the hydrogen peroxide, because as I said, that's the new thing, hydrogen peroxide rather than chlorine, because actually hydrogen peroxide is kind of less harsh. It's more gentle on your skin and on everything, and it works just as well. So I think, well, wait a minute, that's not it. So what I think is that this contractor used cheap paint, the wrong paint, because this paint that you use for pools, because we just had our condo, our HOA pool done, which is a small pool, and that paint is really expensive. And so the first thing I thought was, contractor decided to stiff Trump and cut corners on the paint and just put regular latex paint, which you cannot do. The other thing, it might be or both. It might not be the surface was ill prepared, not prepared properly, which is probably both. But then I thought, wait a minute, if I was the contractor and I did that knowing, or maybe he didn't know, but if you cut corners on the paint, maybe it was Trump who found out, wait a minute, no, we're not paying that much for it, because Trump wants the money, right? Trump is the one who's cutting the corners.
Yeah,
so
and I know he got a broker's deal or a finder's fee. You know he did.
Right. He said, we don't need that paint blue. He doesn't know. He doesn't care. And I was astonished at how much this paint cost. It was like for our little HOA pool, it's about the size of somebody's nice backyard pool. $15,000 for the paint.
Oh, my God, you're kidding.
Like, what? No. It was like, so I'm thinking, well, wait, a thing this size, this reflecting pool is probably close to 500,000 square feet. That's going to be a ton of money for paint. So, and I don't think it was painted. I was there once, a long, long time. I don't think it was ever painted before. I don't think the bottom was ever painted. But as a matter of fact, now, actually, in swimming pools, the new pools, they don't use painted. They don't use the paint anymore. The bottom is just, the bottom is just the material that they put in is blue or whatever, however color you want it, probably light blue. But if you got to have paint, this paint is, same with the paint on my veranda, on my, outside my back slider door is, this paint was, and then now I'm realizing it's got all this sealers in it, and these are expensive products. They're just really expensive. And so I think that what they did was they cut corners on the paint. And it would take not long with the water and the sunlight. Yeah, that wrong paint's just going to come right off.
Wow. Wow, wow, wow. Well, it's like everything he touches dies. Even a simple paint job, it can't withstand the Donald Trump touch.
Well, and he doesn't consult. He didn't consult, pond and aquarium people who know about paint to say, don't paint it dark blue. He didn't do that. And he obviously didn't consult any, you can't just get an indoor outdoor painter and say, yeah, paint my pool. No, you got to get a company that knows what to use and how to prepare the surface, because they had to drain our pool and it had to dry for like 2 weeks. They just said they can't even, and so we had to cover it up so that it had to be a dry period, no rain, and cover it up that they could do it. And then it had it can't be.
He didn't do whatever he was supposed to do it right.
No.
There's no way. There's no way. Oh my God.
No. I'm just saying that's what I'm saying is it wasn't the hydrogen peroxide. Because they want to blame Biden for the algae. It's like, well, wait a minute. The thing had to be drained for a period of time. There's no algae. There's no algae in the pipes. Algae doesn't live where there's no sunlight and no water, and there's no water flowing for a month or so. So there's no algae in the pipes. And besides, if you were a professional, you'd watch the pipes anyway. I mean, what are you doing? It's just like, okay, we're going to do this. The whole thing was a big grift, and it's going to look like crap, really crap, with, by
and
the
how
end
much
of
do
the
you
summer.
think it's going to cost to fix it? We spent, first it was $1 million, then it was $14 million to get it this way. But now it has to be drained. All that paint has to be sandblasted off. And by the way, rather than painting it, I've read that the infrastructure, the pipes and the pumps really, and the filters really need to be replaced. It's going to be like most things, it is going to be something that shouldn't have been touched. It's going to cost too much, and it is going to take a lot of time to fix. Yep, there you go.
Yeah, it'll be a $100 million fix.
Yep.
Yeah. Nice going, buddy. And great job on the Iran deal that never won. I mean, this guy is he's just an incompetent boob. That's all you can say. He's an incompetent, corrupt boob. And I don't know who I was listening to yesterday said, you know what? The thing about con men corruption is it catches up to them because they can never really deliver on the product, and it eventually catches up on them. And that's why most con men are always on the move, right? They're getting out of this town and going somewhere else. Yep.
Well, I don't know where he's going to move to, but I can tell you it isn't going to be Italy. He's burned that
Russia?
bridge good.
I think Russia would be a good place for him.
I think so, too.
Or maybe Iran. They might, Iran.
I don't know. I hear Peter Thiel has moved to Venezuela. Maybe he wants to go where Peter Thiel is, though I don't know if Peter Thiel really likes him, a whole lot. But, he's got to go someplace where there's no extradition.
Yeah. Well, I mean, do you really think that it was somebody you had on recently said that he doesn't have any close relationships. His wife doesn't talk to him. Nobody likes him. He's a sociopath. Nobody likes him. Nobody talks to him. He doesn't have any
And even
friends.
his absolutely favorite child, Ivanka, doesn't seem to have much to do with him.
Not anymore.
Not anymore. She figured out a long time ago that he can't do much more for her than he's already done. And besides, all the kids, her husband, Eric, Don Jr., they're just figuring out, let's start a drone company. I know, let's invest in this. And then let's apply for government contracts, and I bet we'll get them. Oh, my God.
Yeah,
I just want to see, I would like to see that family held to account. And I hope that when Donald Trump is gone and off the scene and can't do anybody any more favors, I hope Saudi Arabia pulls their money from Jared's little hedge fund.
John, the book on how to become a billionaire would be pretty short. It would just be go get government contracts all over the world. And the thing is that in a Supreme Court case in 1970, and it was a case called Goldberg versus Kelly about entitlements. And this one had to do with whether or not they can cut off your welfare without notice, or they have to give you a notice and a hearing first. That was what the main case was about. But the court defined what entitlements are, which Social Security and Medicare are not, because we pay directly into them for those are earned benefits.
Exactly.
But in the definition of what are entitlements are government contracts. Government contracts, tax credits, all these things are entitlements because they don't pay into them directly. Military contracts, all these contracts. Elon Musk is the biggest entitlement grifter on the planet. These are all entitlements. If
it hadn't been for government funding and government subsidies, he wouldn't have had one successful business, let alone three.
Because the power of government to raise revenue is how you pool all that money together, and then you get your legislators, your Congress, your crooked Congress to give it to you, to contract with you because, government can't do anything right, and private business is always much more efficient. Just take a look at the reflecting pool, how efficiently they did that. I mean, they cut that to 1.4 instead of 14 million, and now it's got to be done again, right? Yeah. This is all just so much this idea that government can't do anything right. Only private business can, and there's no waste, or they'd be out of business. Not if you're a government grifter business. Mm-hmm. You'll be out of here and be in business for the rest of your life because then what you do is you take your profits and you recycle them around to the politicians, and they just one hand to the other, one hand to the other. You give it to the politicians for their campaign, and they just give you more contracts, and you make the profits and feed them back again. It's a vicious cycle, as they say.
Yes, indeed. Okay, Paul, thank you so much for being here today.
Have a good weekend, Joan.
And have a lovely weekend, won't you?
Oh, you too. Bye-bye.
Thanks. I want to share this text. Who I think this texter misunderstood what I said. I started the show by talking about today is Juneteenth, and slavery was supposed to be ended by the government with the Emancipation Proclamation. But not everybody heard about it. Not everybody put it into effect. So the last place where there was still slavery was Texas. And Union soldiers went to Galveston, Texas, to enforce the Emancipation Proclamation. And they arrived June 19th, 1865. And that is what I thought that I was saying today. But I guess I wasn't clear because somebody texted in, no, slavery didn't end in 1863. It ended in 1865. Yes, it did. June 19th, 1865, hence our celebration of Juneteenth. But thank you, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to clarify that, okay? Let's see, I don't want to take another call because we're almost at the news. Some people are sending me some poetry today. I appreciate that. I would love more poetry. I enjoy the jokes and the cartoons, and why not add poetry to the list? I don't have time to read any of it, but I appreciate it. Let's take a break for news. We're going to take your calls and read your texts for another half hour after this.
Now back to Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
It is Friday, and we spend the first half of the show talking to you, taking your calls, reading your texts. You know, one of the big topics of the week has been the Bears. You know, all of a sudden, we're going to Hammond, Indiana. Whoop, really? Oh, my goodness. That shook everybody up big time. Got this text. I have a friend who lives in Hammond, and he said that they don't even want the Bears for the same reasons we let them go. And, we haven't officially let them go, and they haven't officially signed off on Hammond. But, they want to see how much money they can get and who's going to be willing to pony up the most and what are their long-term prospects for making a big bunch of dough. They're a business. We may think of them as something that's important to the city and the state, but they're a business. And they are going to make that decision looking at where the smartest opportunities for them are to make the most money, like any business. Oh, let's go back to the phone lines. Our good friend Dave from Huffman Estates is on the line. Hello, Dave.
Hey, Joan. On that Versailles, with the signing, they were bringing up the history, and even like what Hartman said at the end of his show, that's where the Germans, signed their peace thing. Well, that was in 1918. He failed to recognize and mention that in 1940, when Hitler rolled into Paris and all of that time, he made the French sign their armistice with Germany on that very same train car in the very same spot. And right after they signed it, he burned that train car.
Oh, wow.
I was surprised he didn't know that. And then did you see where Hegseth made the flu vaccine optional for troops at Lackland Air Base in Texas?
And they have a big flu outbreak. Yep.
Yeah, like 160 troops. 160 troops so far.
Hey, Dave, I've been reading, going back to the signing. Obviously, Versailles would appeal to Donald Trump because he loves all things gaudy. And, man, it doesn't get much gaudier than Versailles. So Macron invited him to Versailles for dinner. Anybody who knows even the slightest amount of history knows that at the end of World War I, that is where Germany signed their surrender, their abject surrender in World War I. And some people are saying that Macron was trolling Trump to get him to sign the Iran deal there, trolling him in a way that he knew that Trump would never understand because, of course, Trump is a student of nothing, let alone history. I don't know. I'm not so sure. I mean, it's fun to think about, but I think when you are at that level of political life, I think you are able to maybe table those little pleasures and look at the big picture. I think Macron knew that if he was going to get Trump to come to dinner, I mean, where else but Versailles? Dear God in heaven. That's the one thing that makes sense to Trump is Versailles. So I'm not so sure. What do you think? Do you think Macron was trolling Trump, knowing that he would never realize what an incredible surrender was signed there once before?
If they would have had a replica train car there, maybe if they put him on that, then he may. But, he likes that, too, because I suppose in Versailles, in the hall there, I'm sure they got a lot of gold leaf up there, and they didn't have to put it up with super glue like he supposedly got caught doing and that. But, that out of those troops that, like I say, one died, and now they're requiring a vaccine again.
Imagine that.
This just shows what happens when you choose political ideology over science.
And they are this has got to be the most anti-science administration that I've seen in my lifetime. Science used to be revered. It used to be something that we viewed as a way to a better life. Instead, this is like science. Oh, science, those smart people. They think they can tell us things, those smart people. I don't know. I don't get it.
Yeah. And then I read a story here today, too, where Trump administration quietly shifts $352 million in federal funds for the White House ballroom. And what do you expect? Just like in 2019, the Trump administration diverted roughly $3.8 billion from the Pentagon. A portion of this money came from unspent funds that were originally allocated for military pensions. And then the other one that I saw then too was in June of 2020 story. The court, Trump wrongly diverted $2.5 billion in military construction funds for border wall. So, a zebra don't change its stripes,
and I think that we spend way too much on the military, but even the large amount we have, I don't think is spent correctly. I've seen over the last 10 years story after story about how military housing is just, it's just sinful what those people have to live in. Leaky roofs, moldy walls, construction that you wouldn't live in if you had any other opportunity. And we need to treat our military people better. Some of that money needs to go to beef up the VA. Some of that money needs to go to rebuild family housing on military bases. How about that?
Yeah, a lot of them, like you mentioned, on them housing, if it was in the civilian world, they'd be condemned.
Yes.
And with that Iran-U.S. conflict, why don't we just call it what it is? It's an armistice, just like Korea. There's on again, off again.
It certainly doesn't seem to be a real peace deal.
No.
And by the way, even though Lebanon and Israel have called a ceasefire, as near as I can tell, Iran, which pulled out of this Swiss negotiation that was supposed to start, I haven't read anywhere where they're like, oh, that's great, there's a ceasefire, okay, we're back on again. So I guess J.D. Vance just has to sit at home and wait for the phone call.
Yeah, but with that reflecting pool, like we're talking about with those chunks, is that or sealant or whatever it is that the monster of the Green Lagoon? and what do you, like I say, what do you expect? Cheap paint, coming from a guy, like I said earlier, who was caught, putting super glue to stick up gold leaf and stuff in that place, and with the Netanyahu and that on that, you think maybe he thought with this Iran and all of this stuff, and that he could be a hero like his late brother Yoni at the Entebbe raid or something?
I don't know. I still believe that Netanyahu he's appeasing the far-right faction of Israel that just wants to do enough military action that Israel is protected forever. I think Netanyahu also sees the benefit. Hey, as long as Israel is at war, nobody's going to put me on trial for fraud. So, hey, let's keep it going.
Yeah, I'll leave you with this one so others can still get through. With Trump, with his hatred, about what Iran was doing, like he says, 47 years now, how come he didn't do nothing in his first term against Iran?
That's a very interesting question.
Yeah,
it is a very interesting. Maybe because there were people who he actually listened to. Remember how in his first term he had the generals? Yes. And I can't imagine Mattis or Kelly or McMaster. I can't imagine any of them saying, oh, yeah, let's attack Iran. That's a great idea.
Yeah. Or they told them they'd close off the Strait of Hormuz.
Yep.
All right. Have a good weekend.
Thanks, Dave. Have a good weekend. Got an interesting text about this whole Israel, United States, Iran situation. Somebody is speculating that Israel is probably very unhappy with at least one part of the memorandum agreement we've made with Iran, where we agree to pay them reparations. Somebody texted in, I'm sure that Israel doesn't like the idea of the money flow to Iran, gives Iran time to secure and replenish arms. That could very well be. We are going to get to more of your calls when we come right back after this.
Now back to Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
We are taking your calls till 3:30, reading your texts. Greg from Lake in the Hills is on the line. Hey, Greg, thanks for the call.
Hey, Joan. Good afternoon. Thanks for taking my call. The purpose of my call today is, first of all, about Juneteenth. I got to admit, I don't know how unique I am, but I don't recall knowing anything about Juneteenth up till about 4 or 5 years ago, maybe a little longer. I don't know. I don't know if it wasn't taught in history books or I was. I don't
think I was ever taught about it. I don't remember ever being taught about it. Like you, it was something I learned about as an adult.
It's the same thing with that or similar thing like the story in Tulsa, Oklahoma, was it, where the government at the time they came in there and bombed their little town there. It was all black people.
Burned it to the ground.
I mean, they bombed it. They actually bombed it. You know, they dynamite and everything. It was terrible, but I never heard of that in school either. So
me neither.
And now we got this, this older and his billionaire friends that are going around. I heard yesterday he got the courts backed him on something to do with George Washington's house, where they could remove something where previously they put a hold on it, but something about slaves in George Washington's his memorial house. I heard that. But my main reason in calling, I wanted to relate a name of a book that is appropriate for Juneteenth. It's a fiction book, but it's a historical fiction book. It's by Stephen Hunter. He's a very prominent author, and he's a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist also. He's 80 now, so I'm sure he's retired, but he's written a lot of different books, and they're very well written. But this book is called Pale Horse Coming. And this book is it takes place in 1951, and he's hired, the main character is, he's hired, but it's a friend of his who's asking him for help. And his friend has a client who's passed away, but he left something to his son or his nephew, but he doesn't know if he's alive. And his last known address is down in Mississippi. Well, that's as much as I'll tell you about the details. But basically, the main character goes down there and tries to find this guy to get proof of life or proof of death. And the story unfolds, and he finds out that basically they're running an antebellum era, like a plantation with a prison. And I guess this is a real-world prison. And I think it's called Parchment Prison or Parsons Prison. I don't remember, but in the book it's called The Crucible. But, boy, what a great book. And I'll just give the name again real quick. Stephen Hunter, the author, and Pale Horse Coming. And it was written in 2001, I think it was. But, boy, what a story. And it's kind of appropriate to Juneteenth because there was a delay, and this delay was 1951, and it was like slavery. And it was going on in there. And it's based on fact.
Yeah.
So,
thanks for that recommendation. I'm always looking for good things to read, especially things that will help educate me on those subject areas that I'm a little weak on, which is a shockingly large number of subject areas, Greg. So thank you.
I never want to pass up a really good book, and I would put this, and I highly recommend. It's very well written. I've read many books by this gentleman. But anyway, thank you very much. Have a great weekend, and
thank you
to all my fellow callers and listeners.
Yes,
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Let us go to Chicago, where Ron is on the line. Hi, Ron. How are you?
Oh, yes. On April 9th, 1865, General Robert E. Lee surrendered. This was supposed to be the end of the Civil War, but in Texas, the North and South, they were fighting until the middle of June. So the communication was not very good.
Yeah. Or was it a communication problem, or did the people in charge know and just decide to ignore it? That's also a possibility.
Oh yeah, and there is a government official in Italy that was supposed to come here over the weekend and meet with Trump, and he said no way. Not after the incident with the what was her name, Miss Maloney. Was that her name?
Yeah, Georgia Maloney.
After that, he said no way, I'm not coming here. Forget it.
Like you would be invited anyway. But thank you, Ron. I appreciate it. Always good.
I got one more thing. Trump called Obama's presidential center a complete disaster, and and then Trump called Obama a expletive deletive. I don't know if you heard that.
I did not hear that, but it doesn't surprise me.
Yeah.
And what I wondered about was just out of protocol, did the Obamas invite Trump? But apparently, they did not. Bush was invited, Clinton was invited, Harris was invited, Biden was invited, but Trump was not invited.
Yeah. And Siskel and Ebert, they would have given Obama's presidential center 4 stars. And
two big thumbs up.
And with Trump's billionaire convention, they would have given him 2 thumbs down.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Thanks for the call, Ron. Always good to talk to you. Let's go out to Oregon, where Victor is on the line. Hey, Victor, thank you so much for the call.
Hey, thank you, Joan, for being there. You're such a great voice for all things politics.
Thank you.
You're right up to date on everything. That's why we love listening to Joan Esposito.
Well, thank you. That's very kind of you to say.
Well, I just want to say a few things. First, the reflecting pool. The type of hydrogen peroxide they use is not what you buy in the store. It's a very strong solution, and it could even not only melt the paint, but it can even tear into the concrete. It's so strong that witch's brew, if you get too close, will ruin your lungs and your inside. So I don't recommend anybody getting even close to the reflecting pool. It's a danger, it's a hazard, toxic. And just to show you how bad the deal was with Iran, Donald Trump is letting Iran actually enrich uranium to a certain point. There's no oversight on how much they are working on as far as the uranium goes. And he's allowing them to have ballistic missiles and ICBMs. Now, what do you think is going to happen with the new Ayatollah who lost his wife and his only son, one of his sons?
Well, one of the mainstream media outlets is reporting that the new leader of Iran has said he doesn't like this deal, but he's not going to oppose it. So he's gonna let it move through.
He's gonna love it, definitely.
No, heck yes.
Once he puts an atomic warhead on one of those ballistic missiles or ICBMs, I suggest everybody start building bomb shelters.
Yeah.
Because
well, that's a really interesting topic, Victor, because yes, Iran seems to us to be pretty radical and pretty unstable, and you worry about a country like that, North Korea, I'm looking at you, having nuclear weapons because you feel somehow that their threshold for using them might be lower than you would like. But most of the experts that I've read have said that part of the reason why they gave the United States so many concessions in the deal that they signed with Obama is because that what they really want nuclear weapons for is to make sure that Israel and anybody else doesn't invade them or attack them. Because as crazy as we think North Korea is, nobody's going to attack them because they're probably crazy enough to use those kind of weapons. So I don't know whether would they be more likely to use nuclear weapons? I have to believe that they would. But is their main goal just trying to protect their own autonomy? Quite possibly. And we've just shown them that they need to protect it, haven't we?
Yeah, you have a very good point. The person that murders your wife and your son, he might have a different attitude.
Yep, but I would. I don't know about him, but I sure would.
Well, you're right about nuclear deterrent. People who have nuclear bombs, they don't use them on each other because of the reprisal of another country using atomic warheads against them. But yeah, it's a great point that you took. But what I hate is the $300 billion that's going to Iran when Trump and Republicans in Congress cut all our Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security, and here we are giving $300 billion to Iran. Does that make any sense?
Oh, you want things to make sense, Victor? Oh, you are so sweet. You have so much hope in your heart, Victor. Don't lose that, okay?
I'll try not to. You either, Joan. I love you.
Thank you, Victor.
And have a good weekend.
You too. You too. Somebody texted in about if indeed Donald Trump can end this war and if the flow of oil begins again, and the prediction is that even if and or when gas prices come down, will they go down to the level they were before the war? Did the price of cereal come down to where it was before COVID? No, it did not. So this person is predicting that the price will come down some, but not back to where it was before, but that Trump supporters will say, oh my gosh, look at this. He brought down gas prices. And you know what? You're probably right. Certainly Donald Trump will go around crowing that he brought down gas prices. And oh, woe to anybody who reminds him that they're still higher than they were before. That will not go over well. We are going to take a break. We are going to be back with much more after this.
Now back to Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
You know, I love to talk about books, to talk about authors, particularly when they have written something that is politically, historically, really important. I want to introduce you to one of those authors right now. Donna Chaffee is here, and she has written a tribute to a man whom she worked with and campaigned for, Robert F. Kennedy. And lest you get confused, we're talking about the real Robert Kennedy, not the new lackluster imitation Robert Kennedy that we have come to know and dislike. Donna, how are you?
I'm fine, Joan. Thank you for calling.
With this book, First Great Sorrow, you decided to take a look at somebody I remember from when I was a little girl, but really even then never really knew a lot about him. And for younger generations, he's just kind of this sort of a mythical figure that is described in broad brushstrokes. First of all, tell me about your relationship with Robert F. Kennedy.
Well, to start out at the beginning, John F. Kennedy, the president, was a hero of mine. I was in high school, senior in high school when he was assassinated. And I decided, I've got to get into public service. And I decided to go to university in Washington, D.C. This was before Robert Kennedy even announced that he was going to run for the Senate. So when I got there, and by August he had announced his Senate run, and when he won in November, I decided, I've got to work for him. So I had set up my schedule at school so that because I was going to George Washington University, and it's a school that appeals to the workers in the public sector as well as high school graduates. So they had night classes. And so I set up my schedule so that I would have most of the day free to work on Capitol Hill. And the first week that he was sworn into office, I went down to his office and volunteered to work, knowing that if I could get my foot in the door, I could probably get a hired position because, they were just setting things up at the time. So that's what I did, and after a month working for him, they hired me on his staff. So that's where I got to know him.
And tell us about him. What was he like? What did you think was interesting about him?
Well, he was totally different from the mythology that had been generated about him, back in the day. And I didn't know him when he was Attorney General or when he ran his brother's campaign for president. But, the press used to always refer to him as being ruthless and cutthroat and opportunistic, all of those negative things. And what I found out from working with him and having one-on-one interactions with him was that he was totally the opposite. First of all, he was a very shy man, so shy that his hands would shake and when he had to public speak. And
really?
Yeah.
That's so unlike my idea of him as being this confident, bold human being who wants to share his vision. That's really interesting.
Well, when it came to the issues and things that he really cared about, he was all those things.
Mm-hmm.
But in private and in a personal sense, he was a very quiet, shy man. I remember taking my parents into his office to introduce them when I was working there. And they couldn't believe it because we just stood there for a few moments and he said nothing, and it was very awkward. And then finally he said, oh, well, Donna runs the whole office, making a joke. And my mother came back with something like, oh, I knew she ran our lives, but we didn't realize she was running your office too, which was ridiculous, of course, because I was working in the mailroom. But and so then things lightened up a little bit, but with people he didn't know, some people, I think even senators up on the Hill, interpreted it as his being rude or abrasive or something, something negative, but because oftentimes he just would be very quiet, and like he didn't do well on these Meet the Press type shows either, because his tendency was to be silent. Right. That doesn't go over very well when you're on the air.
Well, how did he give people the impression that he was so rough and tough and strong and when he was quiet and nervous?
Well, I don't, like I said, I only knew him from January 1965 on. Now, what happened before that, he ran his brother's presidential campaign, and he did a good job of it. Who knows what his interactions were with various political figures or with the press? I don't know. I wasn't there. And also as Attorney General, and he was a tough Attorney General. But I'm just speaking from a personal interaction point of view. I don't really know. It was just a mystery to me. I realized that from the first time. When they decided to hire me, I was required to go to a pre-interview or an interview with him before it became final, and it was a real kind of strange interview because, he let me do most of the talking, and he, asked questions that really didn't have to do with the job. Wanted to know, why I was working for him when I came from California, and but I just immediately got the impression from him that he just seemed so shy and gentle and nice.
Wow.
So, but I do talk throughout my book about all of the interactions I had with him, and that is one of the main themes of my book, that indeed he was not what people had come to believe. And I think a lot of media or press people who followed him during the campaign came to really feel that about him too, and came to really like him and love him. But, as newspaper reporters, I'm thinking you're not supposed to be showing, bias in that regard, too. So I think a lot of reporters just didn't want to be viewed as being soft on him or something, particularly having this reputation. So, and of course, I talk also in the book about his relationship with President Johnson, which
I wanted to ask you about that.
Yeah. Well, we on the staff, we knew how he felt about Johnson and how Johnson felt about him. But
how would you describe that? How would you describe how he felt about Johnson and how Johnson felt about?
They despised each other.
Oh, that's succinct.
Simply. But, they had to work with each other. Johnson was very paranoid about Robert Kennedy, and he thought everything that he did was, a precursor to him running for president, which it wasn't. I mean, everything we did over there, and it worked to the opposite because, I think one of the reasons that Robert Kennedy eventually ran for president was he was being blocked by Johnson continually on any of his legislative initiatives. So he came to the conclusion that in order to get anything done, he was going to have to run for president because in Congress, Johnson was just anything that Robert Kennedy did, Johnson interpreted as an attack against him. And so did the press at the time, amazingly. I mean, there were all kinds of articles written. Yeah, it was amazing.
Well, give me an example of something that Robert Kennedy did or tried to do that Johnson perceived as an attack and how was reported in the media as a perceived attack.
Well, from the get-go, of course, his opposition to the war in Vietnam, and that started quite early. He's not given credit for that. People think he was a Johnny-come-lately as far as opposition to the war, that he only came out after Eugene McCarthy, which is totally untrue. He started opposing the war in 1965 from the time I was there. So every time he would make a statement about it, the press would frame it as, oh, here's Robert Kennedy trying to, as a personal attack against Johnson. Also, like in as late as 1967, RFK introduced a housing bill that was basically framed on the ideas that the Bedford-Stuyvesant project he had initiated was sort of getting, private companies investing in urban areas. And our staff had worked on it for months, getting this bill together. And, it's hard for a freshman senator to get anything introduced and passed. But they had spent months on preparing this bill. And when it went to committee, Johnson's HUD secretary said, oh, it's superfluous. And then a couple weeks later, Johnson came out with his own bill, which was really just a watered-down version of RFK's bill. So, it was like that all the time. He always felt like he was fighting against that because Johnson thought, when he took a trip to Latin America in November 65, that this was a way to, that was the beginning of his presidential campaign. It was basically a fact-finding tour. But so it was like every single thing that Robert Kennedy did, and he was puzzled by it. I think he asked one of the old JFK old-timers who was still in the White House, what is it, why is he, why does he have it out for me? I'm just a measly senator when he's, president of the United States, he's the one with all the power. Why does it bother him so much, So it was, he just couldn't figure it out, but I don't know. There are stories about that their animosity went way back to the 1960 campaign. I don't know what the real story is, but there was a falling out, and that he didn't want JFK to have Johnson as his vice president, and maybe Johnson found out about that. And so there was bad blood that went back quite a long time, but
it's interesting, Donna,
battle
for you to tell that story because, everybody in political life in D.C. currently seems to be so at odds, parties so at odds with one another that there just doesn't seem to be any bipartisanship or any common ground anymore. And sometimes I will admit I'm guilty of this. I look back on those days of LBJ and Bobby Kennedy and think, oh, it was a simpler time when people were more likely to talk about things and get along. And at least in this instance, you're saying that is not the case.
Well, between the two of them. Now, in fairness, I think people did work across the aisle more back then, and even pre-Trump, I think they did, because the senators, for instance, would always try to get, if you're a Democratic senator introducing a bill, you try to get a Republican to come on board with you to co-sponsor it or something like that. And I mean, I think people were trying to get things done and come to some common ground, whereas it doesn't seem to be any common ground lately at all. It's really depressing. I mean, one of the reasons I wrote the book was because of Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who is such a divisive character. And it just breaks my heart. If you do a Google search for Robert F. Kennedy, you come up with like 3 pages worth of RFK Jr. And I thought, young people are not even going to know who his father was eventually.
Yep.
It's just,
And I remember when Bobby was running for president, reading voter surveys where they would ask people who you're going to vote for. And some people would say, well, I'm going to vote for Bobby Kennedy. And they would say, well, what's your reason? Well, those Kennedys, that's a good family. And they really care about this country. And they didn't seem to understand that Bobby was not cut from that cloth.
No, he wasn't. I mean, for a while he did some environmental work, years ago, maybe 30 years ago. But, I'm just expressing my personal opinion here, but I thought, I knew him when he was a child, and I always thought he was a little strange then. And I think, there might have been some jealousy being one of the middle kids with all those children. And for instance, Senator Robert Kennedy was very close to his son David, who was a very sensitive child. Now, David was younger than RFK Jr. David was younger than RFK Jr. So, I think, he might have, there might have been a little jealousy involved there,
I can see that.
Who knows?
Donna, we need to take a break, but I want to continue this conversation. I'm talking with Donna Chaffee. She has written a book about Robert F. Kennedy, the real one, not the fake one we're living with now. She worked with him. She campaigned for him. And the story is kind of the man she knew and the man she worked with and how things intertwined between them. We are going to take a break. We are going to be back with more after this.
Now back to Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
And with me is Donna Chaffee. She's written a book about Robert F. Kennedy, First Great Sorrow. She knew Kennedy, worked with Kennedy, campaigned for Kennedy. Donna, I don't know. Sounds like you might have come into Robert Kennedy's life a little later. But what, if anything, can you tell us about his relationship with his brother John?
Well, I immediately particularly the first year that I worked for him, I mean, you would often see him just like space out, is the best I can describe it. I mean, he would just, it seemed like he was someplace else, He would get this very sad look on his face. And, I mean, I think most people understood that he was thinking about his brother. I mean, it was, I remember the first time I ever saw him speak was before I started working for him. I went to the groundbreaking ceremony for the Kennedy Center, not the Donald Trump Center, the Kennedy Center. And RFK was there. It was the first time I ever saw him speak, and as was Johnson. And when RFK got up, I mean, I was just so distracted by it because he looked so sad. And, he had just won the election to be senator from New York, and he didn't seem at all jubilant or anything. He just seemed very sad. And, it just broke my heart. I mean, I know that he used to go up at night to his brother's grave and spend time there. I remember once when he gave me a ride home as we passed the south portico of the White House. We had my friend Provy, who I talk a lot about in the book. She was real close to the Kennedy family, was in the car too. We were in the back seat, and the senator was up front with the driver, Jim Boyd. And we had been laughing and talking the whole way. And then we got to the back of the White House because there was a street there you could drive on in those days. Traffic was allowed. And all of a sudden, he just went silent, and he had been sitting up against the door, turning his body to talk to us, and he just faced forward and just went totally silent. And his driver, Jim, seemed to sense, and we all did, his discomfort. And so Jim sped up and drove as quickly as he could past the White House. And then it was like a complete transformation. And then he turned back around, and we picked up where we left off. But, I think, those of us on his staff would never talk about JFK. I mean, because it was just obviously too painful to him, particularly that first year. He never mentioned his brother. I remember he gave a after-work staff party in March of 1965. It was the first time other than when I'd been interviewed, that I'd been in his office and got a chance to look around. And at first he greeted everybody at the door and then told a funny story about that day, about his dog Brumus. And then he went over in the corner and he just stood by himself. And he looked very sad, And I was looking around and saw he had a bunch of pictures of JFK on this table near the door. And I was looking at them and feeling very sad myself. And I looked up and noticed him looking at me, looking at the photos. And I felt this, I just wanted to go over and hug him and say, yeah, I loved him too, or something. But then people wouldn't, he just stood there by himself for most of the party. Nobody talked to him because nobody wanted to intrude upon his private thoughts, whatever they were. He just, but I think, he started to come out of that. And sadly, I think by the 1968 campaign, he was becoming his own person, free, not completely free. Of course, he'd been so hurt by the death of his brother, but he seemed to be coming into his own as a person. And I think it's just it's more tragic the fact that he at that point in time was when we lost him.
Do you think he ever feared for his own safety after living through what happened to his brother?
Oh, yeah. We were, we got threats all the time at our office. There were threats, back in 1966 when I saw him when he came out. He was campaigning for the midterms back there. I was with him when they had received this threat, which turned out to be, it didn't happen. So, but he got very angry when his staff, the advance people and his protection people would try to keep him from going into crowds. And he would sense, like the time in Berkeley, Jerry Bruno, who was an advance man for him, they saw a car, where the person in the car was traveling alongside our entourage, and the guy matched the description of somebody who had phoned in a threat to the police or to someone. And so Jerry Bruno jumped into the car next to RFK, and he knew exactly what was going on, and he just gave him one of his looks. What the heck are you doing?
Wow.
But he would tell the staff, look, I know, I can't, if somebody out there wants to kill me, they will, and there's nothing we can really do about it, particularly to stop that. And so he would get mad at his staff when they would try to protect him. Sometimes, he was supposed to be in a convertible and they would change it to a closed car. he was supposed to go out the front door, and they shuffled him out the back door. And well, part of it was he just wanted to be close to the people he cared about, And, I think part of he was constantly challenging himself with these physical feats, white water rafting, climbing down the Grand Canyon in 115-degree weather. I think part of it was just his way of challenging the fates, thinking,
wow.
Okay,
well, but
if you're going to try to kill me. But
I think politicians have this same sense that journalists have, that somehow you're immune, you're impervious to the same threats of all the people around you, like journalists who cover war zones. They don't in any way, shape, or form think that anybody's ever going to shoot them or that they're ever going to get blown up. There's this false sense of safety. And I think a lot of politicians have that as well. Like, nothing can happen to me. How would something happen to me?
Well, I don't think it was that so much with him. I think he was just fatalistic,
If it does, it does.
His brother shot to death. I mean, there's a story about when he was in San Francisco, there was in Chinatown, some firecrackers went out, and Ethel was in the car next to him, and she ducked down, but the senator just kept, standing there. I mean, it was this sense of, if it's going to happen, it's going to happen, and I'm not going to change my life, what I do in my life to keep from getting shot. But, all of it, when I first heard he had finally decided to run for president, I just had this sinking feeling because I had seen all the threatening letters and had been there even when we had a threat. So, but you're hoping against hope. And, of course, back in those days, presidential candidates didn't get Secret Service protection. So he had, Rosie Greer and a couple other big guys as bodyguards. And, it was not an organized protection unit.
Wow, I had forgotten about that. That as each tragedy piles on top of the last tragedy, we became more careful and more careful and more careful in a way that we hadn't necessarily.
Yeah, they changed the law right after his assassination, but a little bit too late.
Yeah.
And you talk about Johnson and him, his relationship. One of the most despicable things I think Johnson ever did was he tried to keep him from being buried in Arlington.
Really?
Yeah, he asked his top staff, is there any way, is he actually eligible to be buried in Arlington? And there, as president, he probably could have kept him. And they said, just, don't do something that cruel to his family,
Wow.
But, that's how deep Johnson's resentment went towards
Louise.
him. And, in fact, the senator at one time said he thought Johnson would rather die and have Hubert Humphrey become president than see Robert Kennedy become president.
Wow.
He said it jokingly, but, it was quite true.
Wow. Donna, thank you so much for joining us and sharing this amazing book with us that really shows a human side of Bobby Kennedy, and what it was like for him and what he was like as a person. Thank you so very much. I hope that a lot of people read The First Great Sorrow, because if this discussion is anything about what it's like, it's a terrific book. And thank you for sharing it with us.
Oh, thank you. Okay, thanks so much. I appreciate it.
It was great talking to you. We're going to take a break for news and be back with more after this.
Don't turn that dial.
A dangerous mistake to make.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive, returns right now on WCPT 820.
I am so pleased to welcome Professor Brian Endless from Loyola back to our airwaves. You know, everybody I've talked to today, Brian, didn't realize that this was Juneteenth. Perhaps once you realized that, you were sorry, you agreed to talk with me, but I'm glad you didn't cancel. I'm so glad you're here.
No,
Oh,
you know
no, it's
what?
a
It's
holiday?
Juneteenth.
What am I doing on the radio?
We have to talk about Juneteenth on the holiday.
I would love
That's
to.
important. It's important. How are you, Joan? Nice to be here again.
I'm delightful, considering it's a holiday that I don't get off.
It's true. At least we should get double time or something
Yes,
like
time
that.
and a half. I'm sure Paul Shivari back at the studio is getting double or triple time, but the rest of us, we're just kind of limping along.
Exactly. Good for Paul. Good for Paul.
Yeah.
I'm not getting any
So,
extra
should we
pay.
start with Juneteenth?
Quiet, Paul.
Okay.
Shall
go
we start
ahead.
with Juneteenth then?
Yes.
All right. So for those who don't know, Juneteenth celebrates the actual day in the United States where the last slaves found out that they were freed after the Civil War. It was a little bit over 2 years after the Civil War ended, and there were still slaves in Texas who had not been informed and technically were not free until Texas approved of the laws in 1865. So as opposed to the Civil War ending with the Emancipation Proclamation or slaves being freed, it wasn't until well after the war that everybody was freed. And that kind of, to me, is the story of race in this country and of how we switched from slavery to the race problems that we've seen since that point in time.
Yeah. Do you talk about it in your classes? Do you have discussions about it or teach the significance of it?
It comes up because I teach some classes on Africa and the African diaspora, and then it comes up in just generic discussions of slavery, and then most importantly of inequality, and how everything from slavery forward led to the inequality that we see in the country today. And then also it's led to the culture wars, because race has been something that people with money who are in power have been using to divide us, when in reality we should probably be much closer together. Working people who work for a paycheck should be closer together regardless of their race, because really the only people that are opposed to us are the super rich people at the top who are influencing our government so they can get more money. And they have a vested interest in keeping us apart.
Yeah. I have a question to ask you. The way I've always read this, it's like, yes, there was the Emancipation Proclamation, but word of it did not get to Galveston, Texas. Like somehow everybody else knew about it but them. And I wonder if the powers that be in Texas actually might have known about it and just decided, maybe they would keep it quiet for as long as they could. Historically, is there any way to know what the truth of this is?
There is, and we are pretty sure, we can't be completely sure, we're pretty sure not only did the white authorities in Texas know it, but the slaves probably knew it too. And word of mouth had gone through, it just hadn't been made official. And that is like so many things in this country. We had can be called actual apartheid under slavery, when we had laws separating people by races. After slavery, we moved into something that was much more behind the scenes racism. There was some of it in public, but you look at, rules about water fountains and lunch counters and things like that. Those were almost never on the books. They were just things that were quote unquote enforced, even though there was no law. And then there were other laws that were out there that maybe the federal government had passed that weren't enforced until someone threw it in their faces or someone forced them to enforce it. And we're still seeing some of that today.
One thing, Brian, that puzzles me, yes, I know there's racism and there's, we don't want to share the same water fountain or the same public pool with people of another race, but the Tulsa massacre, one of my listeners brought up the Tulsa massacre, and there have been times when there have been African American communities that have been prosperous, that have thrived, that have built businesses and started to build wealth. You know, that's not somebody trying to use the same drinking fountain as you. I don't understand what motivates, they're doing really well, we have to destroy them. That's a kind of racism I don't get. You know, because it isn't just I'm better than you, so I get to sit at the front of the bus and you have to sit in back. That's a whole nother level of evil. Can you give me some insight or understanding of that?
Absolutely. You know, Tulsa massacre, 1921 June, believe 1921 May into June. We need to separate racism out, because racism certainly is, a human being has bigoted feelings toward another human being. That certainly exists. We can't deny that. That almost never leads to action, and certainly not to mass action. So it can lead to little things. What we know throughout history is that most of the worst cases of racism deal with elites driving people to actions. And that is what happened in Tulsa. That's what happened in a number of other places. It comes down from the top, whether it is something like elites ordering the FBI and the Chicago police to kill Fred Hampton, the Black Panther leader in Chicago, or whether it's something like the Tulsa massacre. This wasn't a case of individuals necessarily having problems with it, but the establishment wanted to make sure that there weren't counter groups coming up able to easily govern themselves. And that's really the fear of something like Tulsa, and it was a fear.
It wasn't a fear of these businesses are really successful, they might cut into our businesses and our profits. It wasn't that.
Not as much. No, that was something that was pushed on people. But what's really happening is the people at the top are concerned that we might be getting too many other people in government. And it's not that they're particularly racist either. So it's very similar to what we're seeing now. We're seeing going back to trying to fix elections. And how do you fix elections? You don't do it brutally at the ballot box. We might see some of that. But you do it by taking away people's right to vote. You do it by taking away people's right to education, so they can't be educated enough to vote. And there has always been an issue with the elites in this country, the people who own the most property, not wanting to let others in on the game. And that is where we see some of the big actions here.
So it was more jealousy? Would that be an accurate term?
I don't think jealousy is quite the right term either. So, let's break it down. We had people in Tulsa who were encouraged to start taking physical action. All sorts of reasons were thrown out as to why they should start taking physical action, cutting in on your business and other things. But what it really is a desire for control. And I don't think that is necessarily jealousy. I think it's almost more base than that. These are people who don't care what happens to other people, the people behind this, as long as they get to stay in control. And they are happy to turn any groups against each other. Race happens to be the one that we see most often in the United States, but it is turning people against each other so that they are sometimes ignoring the excesses of the people at the top, but really so that they are not able to take control away from the people at the top or to make a dent in that control.
Just like I've seen people speculate that part of the reason why Republicans go after issues like, trans people and bathrooms is because the bigger issue of we have wildly disparate economic levels. We have the trillionaires and the multi-billionaires, rather than people figuring out that maybe wealth equality is the biggest problem we've got. You focus on who's in your bathroom, and that is a sort of a distraction. Would you say that's correct?
100%. This is actually what I focus on with the Come Together Project and a lot of the stuff I do on inequality. When you look at the political issues today, trans issues, other queer issues, abortion, the trad wife issue that is coming up now, or trad wife questions, and then particularly race issues too. I don't see bigotry at the base of that. I see bigotry being used. At the base of it is tax law and regulation and subsidies. And most humans don't relate those things together. But there are a few tiny number of people in this country who want to make sure that they stay in power and that they get to get as much money as possible, which helps them be in power. And they have created these issues, race a long time before that, but many of the culture wars issues today have been created since the 1980s. Trad wife is something that just came out recently. It's been a 3-4 year movement that it's been going on, and we've recently found out that there are a couple of think tanks that have been feeding all of this information and putting it out there to groups of women that they think may be vulnerable to listen to it, telling them about how good the world will be if they go back to being traditional wives and to being subservient to their husbands. This isn't a homegrown thing. This isn't women reading the Bible or someplace else and saying, we have to go back to this. This is ideas being pushed by a think tank that is funded by wealthy people in order to try to make it so that less women vote in the long run.
And that's also really part of that whole, it's not that we don't want women to vote, but we think there should be one vote per family. And guess who that's going to go to?
Exactly. And that person, the man, happens to be more likely to vote for the laws that the people in power want them to vote for, and to vote for the right people to get into power, as opposed to the woman, where statistically we know that women are more likely to vote for those wishy-washy issues, and that they're more likely to be on the side of things like, feeding kids and childcare and making sure everybody has enough insulin if they need it. And who needs that stuff?
Yeah, really. Well, I grew up in a house like that. I mean, my parents didn't talk a lot about politics, but every time there was an election, my mom used to look at me and she used to say, I have to vote today because I have to cancel out your father.
Excellent.
And she always made sure she got to the polls.
To me.
Mm-hmm.
That's just good parenting. That's a great way to do it.
Yeah. I'm talking with political science professor Brian Endless from Loyola. We are going to take a break and be back with more after this.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
I'm speaking with Brian Endless, a political science professor from Loyola University. I do want to talk about Iran and the memorandum and all the nonsense going on. Brian, first, I want to share with you a clip. This is Senator Cory Booker talking about Donald Trump's surrender and presidential shame. Listen to this.
Donald Trump told us in February, I am going to get unconditional surrender. He just didn't tell us that it would be his unconditional surrender. Don't take my word for it. From the Wall Street Journal to conservatives are calling this Donald Trump's retreat, Donald Trump's blunder, Donald Trump's surrender. This is a horrific deal and capitulation to Iran. All the terms of this, they're solid for what Iran gets. Billions and billions and billions of dollars, the ability to trade their oil on the open markets, and it's nebulous about everything else. Oh, we hope we can get a nuclear deal down the road. This is Donald Trump's surrender because he led us into a war in which he failed to deliver on any of the things he said he would get. Yes, I'm sorry, Donald Trump, you told us you were going to get unconditional surrender. The ridiculous reality right now is it's his unconditional surrender, and we're left holding the bill. Tens of billions of dollars of taxpayer money, skyrocketing costs that have cost America in the collective billions and billions of dollars. And at worst, the loss of American lives, 14 soldiers dead, hundreds more injured for this presidential shame.
I follow Timothy Snyder, the expert on authoritarianism, and he had a post today, and he looked at the camera, and I thought he was going to do something about Juneteenth, and he looks at the camera and he goes, "Happy Capitulation Day," echoing much of what we just heard from Cory Booker. I agree. I mean, I know Trump is eager to get out of Iran, and I'm glad that he has found something to hang his hat on. But he's going to, after the dust settles, he's going to try to frame this as some kind of victory. And it has been such an embarrassment, Brian.
Absolutely. Yeah, I've been sitting here since about a week after this war started, wondering when Trump was going to declare victory and leave. Because if you know anything about the region and about what was happening, we weren't going to beat Iran unless we used, massive, overwhelming force and killed everyone in the country. We simply weren't going to beat them. We weren't going to take over the country. We weren't going to kick out the Republican Guard. We weren't going to get rid of their nuclear program. The fact that apparently nobody in the White House had really thought about the Straits of Hormuz and how easy it is for the Iranians to close the Straits of Hormuz was absolutely incredible. But experts on this knew that this was going to be a failure, which is frankly why no U.S. president had done it before. Benjamin Netanyahu tried to talk pretty much every U.S. president since the 90s into joining him in attacking Iran. And nobody was silly enough to fall for it because it was not going to succeed. So we need to just start by putting that out front. And then the other thing I really like to remind people before we get into this anymore, in June of 2025, this 6 months before the war, the United States and Iran, quote unquote, bombed the Iranian nuclear program into the Stone Age, and we set them back, quote unquote, 20 years. That was 6 months before we had to attack them to get rid of their nuclear program again. It was absolutely ridiculous from the beginning. There was no purpose for this. There was no chance of winning this. And now it's really a question of what are the politics of the loss, as far as I'm concerned.
By my count, there were at least 4 times when we devastated their military. And then, like a few weeks later, apparently it popped back up again. And then we devastated it again. Ooh, they're in the Stone Age. And then a few weeks later, well, they popped up again. They must be the most resilient people. Either that or Pete Hegseth and Donald Trump are liars. I don't know, Brian, which do you think it is?
So this is, dear President Trump, this is why you want an independent press office and a State Department press office and a Defense Department press office that doesn't stick their foot in their mouth at 3 a.m. when you decide to put out your tweet of the day or your 30 or 40 or 50 tweets of the day. It's just insane, the stuff that they have been saying that has no basis in reality. Honestly, this is a 100% honest statement, Joan. I do not want this to seem like it is extraordinary, like I'm going beyond the pale. Donald Trump has surrounded himself with sycophants, with the worst type of toadies, and we see it every time they broadcast a staff meeting. They broadcast, with all the secretaries sitting in the room, the cabinet meeting, and each one of them has to go forward and give Trump a bigger compliment on how well he is doing and on how amazing the world is because of him. These are not people who can question him, and he's someplace between having no idea what he's doing and literally not being all there mentally. And I don't, we'll probably know when the books come out how bad things are, but regardless, this isn't somebody who should be leading us into war.
Yeah. And that's we all knew he was a narcissist. And, world leaders in this second term at first tried to not exactly suck up to him, but praise him, sort of lead him with praise. Oh, this is so wonderful. By the way, you want to do this. And I really believe that behind closed doors, world leaders have to be horrified by the fact that he is so mentally compromised at this point.
Absolutely. Yeah, this is actually something I tell my students. It's not just world leaders and Trump, but it's important that the American people understand this. The world sees what's happening. Donald Trump sucks all the air out of the room in terms of press coverage in the United States, but he does the same thing in a lot of other countries because the United States is so important to the world. And in his first term, people knew that he was a narcissist, people knew that he was unpredictable, but also he was surrounded by some people who were keeping the worst aspects of his personality under control. In his second term, that has all gone out the window. And not only does he not have people controlling him, but he's got the people who came up with Project 2025 and others, Stephen Miller and his ilk, who are pushing the worst aspects of Donald Trump's personality. And the one place that I want to add something to what you said, so our allies, and frankly, everyone around the world, allies, enemies, neutral countries, definitely see that the president of the United States is acting irrationally, is acting without information, is acting on a whim. But in addition to blaming the president of the United States, what we now see is the others in the world, the leaders of the world and citizens who are watching, don't trust the United States people anymore. In Donald Trump's first term, they didn't trust Trump. You can get a bad president every 4 years. That happens. It gets through a cycle, and all of a sudden we've got somebody who's not a great president. It's happened before. But then you kick the guy out of office, and 4 years later, knowing exactly what he was like, the American people voted him back into office. People are now not just looking at Trump, they're looking at us. They're
Once
looking at us.
Could be a legitimate mistake. Twice is a decision. Brian, we need to take a break. I'm talking to political science professor Brian Endless from Loyola University. We will be right back after this.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
I'm joined by political science professor Brian Endless from Loyola. We have been talking about our mentally impaired President Donald Trump, and Brian was talking about how only sycophants and toadies are in his inner circle. Two things about that. Some people are saying, they should invoke the 25th Amendment. But correct me if I'm wrong, Brian, that has to be invoked by the cabinet. And I don't see this cabinet invoking the 25th Amendment. I think Donald Trump could walk into a cabinet meeting with an AK-47 and open fire, and they still would not take him out of office. Speaking of sycophants, though, Bill Pulte, the real estate, the housing guy who Donald Trump put in as interim head of national intelligence. And then it was, he got a lot of pushback. Even Republicans thought the guy was a moron. And then he named Jay Clayton. But then there were some other things that Donald Trump didn't like. So he told Jay Clayton not to show up to the Senate committee because he's holding up Jay Clayton. Because there's other stuff that he wants, and he thinks this is his big wedge. This is his big power play, which means that we're going to have to live with Bill Pulte a little longer, who, according to reporting from CNN, has already asked the intelligence agency for a list of employees so that he can figure out who he can fire. And apparently in a meeting where he was talking about this list, he also asked them if as interim head of national intelligence, do I get a plane? Do I get a plane? That was one of the questions that he asked. I guess, everybody sees those 2 jets that Kristi Noem got, and now everybody wants a plane.
Yep. If you have anything, any interim title, you've got to have a plane or two. You already
Right.
have the
Come on.
driver. Everything's good. And who wouldn't want that? That's just the simple stuff. Doesn't everybody have one of those at their beck and call? Yeah, this is not only insane, but it is all according to plan. And that's, again, one of the things we have to follow. I don't know how many times I come back to Project 2025 when I'm talking about this stuff on a daily basis. One of the ideas that was thrown out there was you can put in your close allies into these jobs. And what Donald Trump has been doing is he's nominating his lawyers and other people who have worked with him in positions like that and who are incredibly loyal to him, in some cases, Congress people who have been the toadies and sycophants along the way. You certainly can't get nominated if you don't support the idea that the 2020 election was fake and it was fraudulent. That's the number one thing you have to believe in. But then you put people up for nomination, and it doesn't actually matter that much if they are approved or not, because you have an interim director in there who you control, and that interim director is not appointed by Congress, and that interim director can do whatever they want to. And by the way, that may include things that are illegal. So we might see, Pulte coming in and doing a bunch of illegal stuff. One of the things right now is a huge question about staffing. Trump has said that he wants to get rid of civil service protections that protect most of the people in our government from being fired for political reasons. He wants to be able to fire people. That's almost definitely going to be illegal. It's against union contracts, but that doesn't mean you can't do it and fire people and then let the courts sort it out 2 or 3 or 4 years later after those people are gone. And if they get some money back, who cares? It's not your money. When it's doing it, it's the people's money. We'll just take out some extra debt when that happens. But we're seeing that from Doge forward, that it doesn't really matter whether it's legal or not. Once you get that position of power, and especially if you're not a confirmed person, if you're just appointed, you pretty much do what you want or what the president wants you to do.
Yeah. And, there have been at least a couple of agencies where Doge came in and fired everybody, where the courts have ruled these firings were illegal, these people need to be brought back. But as you said, it doesn't happen quickly. And whenever I see these stories, it's like, oh, great, it was illegal. These people can be or should be rehired. But how many of them are still even available to go back to that job? Because most people who have jobs have them to pay their bills. And when you don't have a job, you have to find another job to pay your bills. And I haven't seen any reporting that says, well, a judge ruled that all these people need to be reinstated, but reports are that only 30% of them are still available to come back to work. So, it's sort of like a win even when you lose for Donald Trump.
100%. Yeah, and this is a attempt to take away the power of the government, move it all into the executive, and leave as little power in the bureaucracies as possible. And, Americans go back and forth about whether we should have big or small government. Personally, I want a government that works for us. And to have a government that works, you have to have a bureaucracy that works. So one example where we've seen a ton of resignations and firings is in the FBI. The FBI has cut off a gigantic amount of their senior staff. And even if we change presidents in a couple of years and that president tries to bring the FBI back, they're not going to have experienced people in those jobs. So the FBI is not going to be able to stop crime. That's a huge thing. The IRS has been absolutely gutted. And while many Americans may not like the IRS, the IRS people that have been gutted are the ones who would try to go after the big cheaters, big corporations, and gigantic people. You and I, Joan, if we get paychecks, we just pay our taxes automatically in that paycheck, and the government knows exactly what we owe. But if you make all your money off of investments, you're a big corporation, those are the people who are more likely to cheat on their taxes and not get caught. And the less staff you have and the less experienced staff you have, the less likely they are to get caught. Same thing with regulators, too.
And what I've always understood it to be is, it's much easier for the IRS to go after somebody like you or somebody like me because basically, they pressure us. Maybe we have a lawyer, maybe we don't. But basically, we're not going to make a big deal out of it. We're going to find a resolution as quickly as we can. But when somebody has really deep pockets and the number of lawyers they hire doesn't really affect their bottom line, they do that. They hire all those lawyers and they make the IRS really, really work for it and try to thwart them at every turn. And it takes a lot more money to fight those cases.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is actually, I had a very good friend who worked at the IRS in the division that went after the big corporations for a bunch of years. And they had stories exactly like what you're saying. But what the corporations do is they take advantage of the fact that the IRS cannot have as many lawyers as they do and does not have as much money to throw at the case. And they just keep throwing more and more legal challenges in the way. They get it pushed out as far as possible. They get their continuances as long as possible. And what the big corporations are looking for is a teeny tiny settlement. And in the end, what the very smart IRS lawyers realize is we can get a settlement now, or they might hang this up for 20 or 30 or 40 years and we might not get anything. Let's go for the settlement. So, let's take the 25 million and give up the chance to get the 250 million because we're just not likely to get that and it's going to cost us too much to do it. This is the kind of thing that corporations count on.
Mm-hmm. And this is the reason why Biden tried to get more money to the IRS, to give them finally the backing they needed to go after some of these big folks who always seem to dodge everything.
Yeah, that was one of the problems in the Obama administration. Some of the concessions Obama had to give included cutting the IRS and cutting staff at the IRS. And that is when a lot of this started in terms of the IRS having to change what they're doing. Then Trump comes in the first time around, actually, and it was Trump tax cuts that really messed up the IRS because when Trump put in his round of tax cuts in his first term, he had so many laws that were changed that the IRS basically had to draw all of their staff in from all of the enforcement divisions just to rewrite the tax code so there was a tax code that made sense. And we don't think about that kind of stuff either. So you're absolutely right. When Biden came in, he tried to fix it. He tried to make some advances, and it's just incredibly hard to do for the reasons we've talked about. Once it's broken, it's really hard to fix.
Yeah, absolutely. I am joined by political science professor Brian Endless from Loyola University. We are going to take a break and be back with more after this.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
Political science professor Brian Endless is here with me. Brian, I have talked about all the things that have been forefront of my mind today. With this whole situation, whether it is Juneteenth or whether it is Iran or whether it is Bill Pulte or whether it is something else, what are the things that are going on in politics now that you are paying attention to, especially focusing on?
This was Elon Musk week for me, Joan. And really, I'll just call it trillionaire week since all the trillionaires are Elon Musk right now. And it's not so much that it's Elon Musk himself. It's the whole idea that the world and this country have a trillionaire now. And it's one of those things, what's wrong with that? The answer is everything is wrong with that.
Well, maybe I could live with it. If he said, I've got all this money now, here's a problem the world has, and I'm going to fix it. But no, what are you going to do with that money, Elon? Oh, I think I'm going to spend it on getting people to Mars. I think that's the best use of my money.
Exactly. And even so, he's getting people to Mars and he still has $1 trillion. On top of that, this could go into hunger. This could go into education. This could go into many, many things. And honestly, just this 30 seconds of conversation we're having now explains why we need a tax policy that is completely fair toward the people at the top who haven't been paying anywhere near their fair share for a long time. Because at a very basic level, having them choose how to spend that money is not likely to get it to things that society needs. And there are places where we know, and we can frankly agree. I can put a bunch of Republicans and Democrats together. We can agree on home affordability. We can agree that we need better education and that we need teachers who can teach our kids better. We can agree that people should be fed, that people should have health care. All of those things are out there. And we have a government that is starved, both because a tiny group of people are beating it down, and then that same tiny group of people gets all of their money out of the government, or significant amounts of their money out of regulations that benefit them, subsidies that benefit them, tax law that benefits them. And Elon Musk is the poster child for all of those.
Yep. And remember a while back when there were these big tax cuts for corporations, and they were going to build more manufacturing facilities, and they were going to hire more people, and all that money that they were now going to be privy to was going to go right back into the economy. Except most of those companies used that windfall to buy back their stock. Buying back your stock raises your stock price. They didn't use it to build factories. They didn't use it to hire people. They didn't use it to build things that have been offshored, reshore back to us. They didn't do it for any of the reasons, any of the things that we were told they were going to do. And, you know, I'm sorry, but I don't trust Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos or Peter Thiel to care about anybody but themselves. And one thing that I think I learned recently, maybe the listeners need to find out about this too, is, you know, we always hear about, well, Jeff Bezos didn't pay any tax. Jeff Bezos didn't pay any tax. And I saw Elizabeth Warren explain that once. She goes, well, you know, his salary is only like $80,000 a year, but he has this massive amount of stock that he borrows against, and there's his income, and it's tax-free. That's why she says we have to tax wealth, not income. And I think that makes tremendous sense.
Absolutely. And you put so many things out there, Joan. Let me just try to cover a couple of them. We know that corporations aren't going to pump this money back into the economy or back into their businesses. Alan Greenspan talked about this right after the housing crisis. All of a sudden, economists realize that there's a few people at the top who make a lot of money who are making the decisions for corporations. And wow, they decide what's best for their pocketbooks, not for anything else. Imagine that. How could that possibly be?
I just don't know.
I will also take us back to the 1950s, some of our greatest times that everybody wants to go back to. Booming economy, we built the middle class. Dwight Eisenhower's the president, and he increased taxes on both the wealthiest individuals and on corporations. And he had the best reason I've ever heard to increase taxes. Because if we raise taxes on corporations, what that's likely to do is they're not going to want to pay that for the government, so they are going to push it back into their business to build their business, because that's a business expense. And then that creates more jobs and does exactly what the billionaires are telling us the opposite is going to do now. Eisenhower was absolutely right about that. No question whatsoever that he was there. And Joan, I've talked so much, I forgot your very last question. What was the last thing you said? Because I wanted to respond to it.
Well, that Elizabeth Warren said that we need to redo the way we tax and tax wealth as opposed to taxing income.
That's right. And this is simply the question of income tax versus capital gains tax versus non-existent wealth tax. Our income tax tops out at 37% if you're over something like $500,000 or $600,000. But also almost no one remembers in 1993, Bill Clinton put in a salary cap of $1 million. Bill Clinton in Congress voted for a salary cap. People can't make more than $1 million or it's not deductible. Except they can get bonuses and they can get stock options, and that all goes above it. So what we have is Bezos and Musk and others. There are a number of them who only make $1 a year. Bezos at $80,000. That pays almost nothing in taxes. And what they do is the rest all goes into their wealth. And when wealthy people have a lot of money, they don't spend that money. They borrow on that money. And Elon Musk and Bezos are both famous for talking about this. You know, they want a couple $1 million to go out to lunch in Paris. They have their accountant get that money wired from the bank as a loan, and then they pay back that loan later. And when they pay back the loan, they get to take that off their taxes because they wrote the tax code. So yeah, we need to do one of a couple of things here. We need to tax more fairly. Social Security is another one. There's a Social Security tax cap at $190,000 that just shouldn't exist. They should be taxed on everything. We need to tax capital gains more or just tax it as regular income. Why does investment income get taxed more cheaply? One of the big things is that money that they have not yet realized, what's called unrealized gains. This is when you have, a paltry amount, $1 million in stock, and it grows to $100 million. You don't get taxed on that until you sell it. But the rest of us peasants have the same situation in our houses. So if you have a house that you bought for $300,000 or $400,000 and it goes up to $800,000, lo and behold, you're paying property taxes not on the cheaper amount, but on the $800,000. Why can't we have millionaires and billionaires do that? Why can't we do the same thing on stock investments? And then there's what Elizabeth and Bernie and others have been talking about is the wealth tax. And that's just another very simple thing that we could do that would have pretty much no impact whatsoever on billionaires. No, they're not going to move, by the way. We proved that over and over again.
Yes.
And that would put a ton of money into the Treasury to take care of debt and take care of the things we need to spend. And it's fair because they've been cheating us for so long, and they've been giving themselves so many tax cuts and so many rules that benefit them. We need to pull that stuff back and get them to pay their actual fair share.
What a concept. I also think, and we're out of time, I just want to throw this out there. I think we should pass a law that regulates CEO pay. CEO pay should be only a certain number of times what the average worker or the lowest paid worker is. I mean, we get these
economists
people,
say 10 times.
Yes,
10 times is a good
people
number.
make $80,000 a year, and the CEO of the company is making $400 million a year. That's not right. Anyway, Brian, we will solve these problems another time. Thank you so much for being with me today. I really like talking to you. Thank you very, very much. Well, that's going to do it for me. I hope you're having a great Juneteenth. I will see you on Monday. It is going to be a great day on Monday. We are going to be talking to our good friend Ed Yonka, whom we haven't spoken to for a while. Driving It Home with Patty Vasquez is next. I think Paul Shivari is going to be one of her guests. Oh, my goodness. We've got to stay for that. And Saturday, it's the Democracy Stupid with Edwin Eisendrath. One of his guests is Greg Sargent, who's a staff writer at the New Republic. I will see you Monday. Thank you to Paul for stepping in today. I will be listening to your conversation with Patty, so make sure that it's a good one.
I expect notes.
Yes, I will see you Monday. Good night.